Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. We're born into this world and we're raised slowly. A child, a human child, isn't developed to the extent that many animals are at birth. A horse, when it's born, can walk immediately. A baby takes 10 months to 2.5 years to begin to walk. There is a slow process of development in humans. And there's great influence in human development that comes through the parents and the circumstances surrounding your environment. As you grow up in this world, you begin to learn things and you begin to ask questions. You begin to wonder about what's going on. And people develop in various ways. In school, we don't have curriculums on qualities. We don't have curriculums that teach kindness or compassion or love. These aren't things that we cover. The curriculums in our schools try to teach you the basics of reading, writing, and being able to function in the world. And one of the things that we need to understand is that the mind works well with math, and it works well with reading and the things that we need to function in the world with. It doesn't work so well with understanding the qualities of truth and the qualities that make up our existence in reality. When we try to figure out who we are, when we wonder about the nature of our existence, we are, for the most part, figuring out our existence by what exists outside of us and what we see outside of us. And we define ourselves by what's going on outside of us. But somehow we need to make a transition to define ourselves by what's going on inside of us and becoming in tune with what's going on inside of us. So we need to make a shift in the way we see things from seeing what's going on outside of us as our touchstone of reality to seeing what goes on inside of us as our touchstone of reality. It's something like physics. There's a physics for the external world, and this physics tells you about the movement of things and how these things work and their interrelationship to each other, explains the force of gravity and how it holds us in certain places. But there's a new physics called quantum mechanics, which looks inside of what we can see, which is beyond our visual acumen, which tells us that the world of our sight is not the entire picture. As a matter of fact, it's a very limited picture. But in our existence, through our mind, which is for many of us the way we view our existence. What the mind sees and what the mind comprehends is what we call reality. And the mind has a limited nature, and the mind is befuddled, confounded, and confused in its ability to see things by various forces that have to do with making ourselves bigger. The mind is constantly under the influence of desire, and the mind is under the influence of arrogance. And I've always found arrogance fascinating. When you see a Chihuahua attack a German Shepherd, it's an example of arrogance. The Chihuahua has no concept of what he's getting involved in. He just believes he can accomplish what it is he's trying to do. And people are like that also. It doesn't necessarily come from attacking larger things, but it comes with their idea of who they are. I know people who are of the opinion that they know better than everybody about almost everything. And I'm sure we've all run into them. And there's no use talking to them, because whatever you tell them, they know better than that already anyway. So their perception in the world is always that whatever they do is the highest level of what can be accomplished. And there's nobody else who knows any more than them or can do any more than them. And you know what that does? That limits people in an extraordinary way. It stops any growth, and it stops any moving forward. It puts them in a place. Now, this arrogance also causes problems, because somebody who has immense arrogance cannot allow somebody else to tell them what to do, to explain things to them, to be somebody who understands more than them. So they're limited in what they hear. They're limited in what they see. They're limited by their own perception. And it needs to be understood really clearly that the mind is a limited tool. It doesn't have the parameter to figure all of this out. For instance, as hard as you may try to see the molecular structure inside of this table that I'm sitting in front of, you're not going to be able to do it. So because you're not going to be able to do it, and because you can't do it, a certain amount of arrogance will tell you there is no molecular structure. There's only what I can see. What's beyond my ability to comprehend cannot be comprehended and isn't comprehensible. This is one of the bulwarks of atheism. There's nothing beyond which I see. There's nothing beyond which I understand. And when you deal with a concept like God, which is beyond our understanding, beyond our limitations, beyond our ability to see, the arrogant one will just deny the existence of that. Arrogance denies the existence of anything it doesn't comprehend and anything it doesn't see. To truly go on the spiritual path, humility has to be developed. Without developing humility, there's no move forward. Because to move forward, to understand more, is an admission that at this point in one's existence, there's more to understand. They haven't learned everything yet. There's more to know. In real advanced understanding of things, we begin to see the tiny bit of knowledge that we truly have and how expansive the understanding can become and how we are dependent on that understanding from higher sources. God, let me see. God, bring me to a place where my vision expands, where I see from beyond my physical senses. We are in a body that is controlled by a mind that has certain physical abilities. But to go to truth, to go to reality, we have to go beyond these physical abilities. If we truly believe in God, and we believe in the angels, and we believe in an afterlife, then we know something exists when all of this disappears. And we also know that we don't know what that is. Now, we have to be able to live within those circumstances and rely in and by faith on what we've been told by the prophets and the holy ones. And in order to understand what the prophets and the holy ones tell us, we have to have the humility to surrender to their leadership. We have to have the humility to surrender to their understanding. We have to have the humility to surrender to their teaching. And to do that, there is a phase that we have to go through where we deny the validity of our own thought process. And if you can't deny the validity of your own thought process, you can't move forward, because your own thought process is what's going to stop you from moving forward. I have, when I was with my teacher, seen people sit there and argue with him about basic things, as if they were telling him how it is. And in listening, at the state I was at the time, I could tell the idiocy of the person who was arguing, but it didn't stop them, and it didn't make them flustered. They had this arrogance about them that allowed them to continue, and whatever they were told, it was almost like it didn't matter and they didn't hear it. We have to become small. We have to be able to overcome all of the needs that we have to become big. And that's part of the big problem in this world. We've been told that if we don't become big and important, we've somehow missed out. We're somehow lacking. And in truth, what's important? What makes somebody important? What makes somebody successful? What does it mean to be successful? There's a span of time that we have. And in that span, we go through changes. And sometimes it takes some of our failures in order to be able to come to some of our successes later in time. And if those failures didn't happen, those successes wouldn't happen. Yet, no matter how successful, no matter how much we accumulate, no matter what we do in this world, there's still going to come a time when we dissipate, when we disappear, when the body no longer functions. And what happens after that? And we can't perceive what happens after that, but we've been told what happens after that, and we've been told how to prepare for what happens after that. So if you have a life that is entirely focused on this lifespan and on this world and what goes on in this world, and you spend your time treating it as if it's the most important thing there is, you're going to hit a wall when that next phase comes, because you haven't prepared yourself for it. We are travelers, and our trip is going through many different scenarios. Imagine if you're on a trip to Greenland, which is a very cold place, and Florida. And the trip is all going on in about 7 days. And you have one suitcase. Well, you're going to have a heavy coat, and you're going to have a short sleeve shirt. And if you don't have both, you're going to be very uncomfortable somewhere. For us to be able to fit into the truth, we have to be able to see beyond what this physical world shows us. We have to be able to see what reality is, and we have to figure out a way for ourselves to focus on that. It's been explained to us by my teacher and by many others that reality cannot be seen with the physical eyes. That the reality can't be touched with the physical hands, but it exists. And we have to find a way to be able to understand it and to see it. And if what we are focusing on and what is of tantamount importance to us is what goes on in this world, we're not going to be able to touch the truth, to touch the essential. It's very easy to be integrated with the non-essential because we're surrounded by it. Everywhere we turn, we see it. We're surrounded by all of the things that the world considers important. We're surrounded by politics. We're surrounded by wealth. We're surrounded by fame. We're surrounded by wars. We're surrounded by the constant interaction of people in this world, and we're surrounded by the constant monitoring that's going on about what's happening between the people in this world. And that's what seems to be taken as the most important thing. Read a newspaper. What are the various sections of the newspaper about? 1, what's going on in your municipality? 2, what's going on in your country? 3, what's going on in the nation? 4, what's going on in sports? 5, what's going on among the celebrities? What is the interaction of all of the different people in the world, and how are they interacting? That's basically what the world is focused on. Why were there hermits? Why did people run away from all of this and go to caves? What's the reason? Why are there monasteries where people pull themselves out of this and go to somewhere where they can be isolated, or at least more isolated, and be by themselves? Why? What have they understood about existence that the teeming masses haven't understood about existence? If we want to be in touch with that which is eternal beyond our lifespan, we have to begin to be able to at least understand what it is that's eternal and exists beyond our lifespan. Simply, elemental things corrode and disappear. And if you believe the scientists, they will tell you that over time, the sun will disappear, the earth will disappear, the planets will disappear, the solar system will disappear. All of it will disappear. Now, it may be reborn in other ways in other places, but that which we know will disappear. What isn't disappearing? What stays and has credence through time and lasts through time? If you're a student of literature, you'll notice that certain things are written about throughout the ages. They don't change. The major topics that people write novels about don't change. The major understandings that people have don't change. And what are these? What are these things that last through time, that last beyond life, that have an eternal nature to them? Love has an eternal nature to it. And if we focus our lives on love, we become different as a being. Because everything that we consider different disappears when love enters the equation. You don't feel the same way about someone you love as you feel about someone you hate. But very interestingly, if you love, you can't hate. So if you love, then everything that you hate disappears because you love. And this is the understanding of mercy and compassion. There's a forgiveness that stretches not only to the friend, but to the enemy, and goes beyond interpersonal relationships, goes beyond family, goes beyond race and culture and language and religion, and extends closer to the understanding that Allah, God, created all of it. And if Allah created it, we love it. And this takes us to another place. So, what does it mean to transcend? It means to go beyond the pettiness of differences, to go beyond differentiating between who's good and who's bad. It's to enter into a state of unconditional love and unconditional acceptance that's capable of loving everything and everyone that we see. Now, that doesn't mean that you should be involved with everyone you meet and everyone in your life. There are people who will be smiling at you all the time and who are ready to suck your blood. There are people who will be looking for your sympathy all the time. And if you give them that sympathy, they're ready to suck your blood. Because you love doesn't mean that everybody else loves too. And that there isn't malevolence in existence. We have to be very careful to stay away from that malevolence and not be involved with it. So, if we see malevolence, if we have the strength to cure it, that's one thing. If we don't, we have to go around it and bypass it. There is a certain discretion in our existence that we have to use as we go through this life. But it shouldn't harm our ability to love. It shouldn't sour us on love. We have to maintain an equilibrium within our being that allows it to love with the understanding that within the world there are difficulties. And there are difficulties that we can't overcome. And these difficulties are left to God to decide, to judge, and to come to conclusions on. In our humility, we have to be small enough to know that there are things we can't understand and to leave them alone. We have to know that there are things we can't change and to leave them alone. All will be made perfect in God's time. But God's time is now. And in truth, if that's understood, everything is perfect now. So what's the problem? The problem is we have trouble perceiving perfection, and through our imagination and our judgment, we conclude that certain things aren't perfect at certain times, and they need to be altered. So what happens? Man begins to try and alter them, and flags are waved, and voices are raised, and guns are pointed, all with an understanding that by doing this, somehow we will make things better. How many thousands of people die while people are trying to make things better? How many thousands of people starve to death because people are trying to make things better? This idea of creating a utopia on earth is an idea that has existed forever. And in truth, it's a very difficult conundrum that man faces. Man needs to accept that his utopia is not in this world. His utopia is with God. And what he can do is he can live a life of righteousness and a life of God's qualities in this world that will allow him to transcend the difficulties of this world. So we, as individuals, need to focus more on who we are and what we are doing. What goes on in most of the world is everybody is trying to fix everybody else, and everybody's trying to tell everybody else what to do and how to do it. We need an insular focus. I noticed that when we were with our teacher, that he in a very real way isolated us. He would say things like, People are constantly bringing problems from the world in here and forcing us to deal with them. Leave the world alone. Let's deal with the unity within each other, and let's bring ourselves to that point. Let's understand that point. If you can love, the most that you can do is to show that love to other people with the hope that when they see that love, it will somehow alter them. Aggression will not resolve problems. Aggression brings about more aggression. And we have to be very careful when we monitor ourselves to notice the level of aggression that we have in ourselves in order to do what we think is an attempt to correct other aggression. Love resolves aggression. Love resolves arrogance. Love resolves all of the problems in the world. A child who's having a tantrum, if you want to make that child better, you hold them and love them. You don't throw a tantrum in response to the child throwing the tantrum. And a lot of the world is people throwing tantrums in response to tantrums, claiming what they're doing isn't a tantrum at all, but a sensible response. It's difficult. It's a balancing act that's really difficult. But the only ones that we can truly have power over is ourselves. And we have to take the position that we will love, that we will understand love, that we will spend our time learning love. In the words of the spiritual, ain't going to study war no more, which is basically saying, I'm going to get out of the aggression business. I'm going to get out of the business of trying to force other people to do what I think they should. Can we do that? Can we be peaceful while all of those around us aren't peaceful? My teacher would always tell the story of 1 dog barking, 2 dog barking, 5 dog barking, 20 dogs barking. And you can either join with the dogs that are barking or walk away and let them bark at each other. These are all choices we have to make. If you want to find peace, you're not going to find it by going outside of yourself. You're going to find it inside of yourself. And you don't have to go to any special place to find it. You can sit down in a chair and there it is, if you let it be. But everybody thinks we need some sort of ritual, some sort of costume, some sort of something in order to find peace. What you need to find peace is the ability to sit still and not be influenced by outside circumstances. And if you can do that, your life will become simpler and happier. And that's what the Sufi path tells you. Sufis in the olden days walked everywhere because it slowed things down. It made it easier for them to be at a pace that was conducive to love. Hastiness pulls you out of love. Quietude brings you the possibility of getting into love. We have to begin to think about things in this way. And we have to begin to understand the things that break our concentration on being in love. The things that break our ability to stay in love. And we have to know what those things are. And they usually stem from some kind of desire or self-motive to make ourselves better than somebody else, show that we understand more than somebody else, to somehow put ourselves above others. If we're comfortable being together with God, we have reached a point of supreme transcendence. Realize that. God is greater than anything that we see. Why are we trying to become involved with that which we see? We need to become involved with that which is greater. We need to focus on that which is greater. We need to surrender to that which is greater. And in doing that, we become truly at peace, and we eternalize our being. May it be so for each of us. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.